Howdy, y'all. Welcome to Not Another Baptist Train Wreck, a dumpster fire of a podcast exploring church revitalization, church planting, and other Southern Baptist goodies we come up with on the fly. We're about halfway through January, and I'm Matt, the pastor of Mayhill Baptist. I'm joined by the pastor of First Baptist of Alamo, Kyle Bierman, and we're glad that you pulled up a chair to join us today as we talk about the weather.
The what?
Horrible timing.
Oh, sorry.
Pathetic.
That was awful.
Pathetic. You heard me. It's the winter, that season that you've never heard of in Alamogordo.
You mean less summer?
Yes,
that's
less
what you
summer.
mean. Less summer. Yeah.
I threw you for a loop there, calling it winter. Yes, yes, less summer. It's when the weather drops to God hates you degrees, where white stuff flows out of the sky, and Texans everywhere freak out, empty the grocery stores of all their bread and milk, and forget how to drive. Well, let's be honest a little bit. They forget how to drive when there's just wet stuff on the road, when it rains. I mean, am I right or am I wrong?
No, I know. I is one. I agree.
Yeah,
Yes.
I is too.
Yes. Yeah. So, by the way, we joked about how we don't have winter here. I've worn shorts twice in the last week, on December 30th and on January 5th. I was in shorts down here.
I hate
in the
guys.
desert. It's awesome. It's amazing. I love this.
And here I am in about 7 layers.
Yeah, you look like Jack Nicholson at the end of, at the end of The Shining. So we're going to talk about what we do when bad weather hits your town, and particularly winter weather, which a lot of the country's been dealing with, particularly back in the east and the northeast. Out here in the west, not so much. I mean, I think we can go play in the mud on the ski slopes here. There's not much up there.
You could go mud boarding,
right? Yes.
but we've already seen it through some of our folks on Facebook or whatever that have either had to cancel services or delay them or all of that sort of thing. But before we jump into the winter weather, what to do's, if you will, let's talk family. How's the fam, bro?
Going well. Going well.
We're still doing homeschool, or have you given up?
Nope, not yet. We're knee deep in the semester.
Awesome.
So nope, it's going well. How about you guys?
We're doing awesome, but I want to take a chance though to brag real quick on our oldest Cadence, or eldest Cadence. I never know how you're supposed to do it. Either way, all of our girls were in a school before we moved to Mayhill that didn't really have a high standard of academic excellence. Okay. You could take 10 chances to get the test right. So they did really well on progress report time and 6 weeks and all of that kind of stuff, but they didn't really get the academic level that they were going to get in a regular school. Then we get to, in our case, Cloudcroft, which is one of the highest achieving schools in New Mexico, probably even the nation, one of the top. Then not just in elevation, but one of the high schools in their academic excellence, what they require of their students. And so 5th grade is already tough. A lot of things are happening. It's, you're starting to learn some more different academics. Things are a little more difficult, but she jumped in from kind of the low expectations of before to the high expectations before with some of these formative years, and really struggled at the beginning and got some C's, which she'd been all A's before that. And so it was kind of concerning. We started thinking, do we need a homeschool? Not that that's a last resort or anything, but we wondered if that's what we had to do. Was she going to make it? And but she said that I'm going to try harder. I'm going to work harder. And she started working more, doing homework, doing extra work, all of that kind of stuff. And not only won the spelling bee a few weeks ago,
awesome.
But she went from having a couple of C's to now having all A's, and the two B's that she had were like 89s or 88. So she has turned around. She is a champ, and we're really proud of her.
That's awesome. How about church?
Ministry
speaking.
Church is awesome. Ministry speak, we've had under 200 people in worship. It's our Baptist numerology or whatever. No, we're doing really well. I'm about I guess two sermons in through Mark and Psalms in the PM, and so I'm preaching Mark 1:9-13 this weekend, and then Psalm 3. I previously preached through Mark at another church that I served at the beginning part, so I have a lot of the background and the context and all of that stuff done, and so that's kind of neat. And so all of that grunt work is done, and I can kind of jump right in. What about you?
So I'm going back and finishing up First John. Started in.
Are you going to finish it this year?
Yeah, that's the plan.
It's not a long book.
No, I know. So we got through the end of chapter 3 right before Thanksgiving, And then beginning of the year, first Sunday of the year, we picked back up in chapter 4, and we'll finish that, I think, by the end of February, maybe first Sunday in March. And then we're going into Hosea in the spring. So that'll be fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have one more question.
Okay.
This gets to the heart of
Yeah.
the matter.
Yeah.
Other than 1001 pumpkin spice recipes,
Yeah.
what are you reading?
So I so far this year, I've finished Letters to a Young Pastor and 5 Love Languages of Children. I'm getting closer to finishing Billy Graham's Behemoth biography. And then I'm reading a couple of preaching textbooks, while also still trying to finish up my doctoral project. So
Yeah.
I'm writing, seems like, as much as I'm reading
Yeah.
at this point, or
Gotcha.
reading not reading books for pleasure, reading for the specific purpose of
I'm so
writing
glad
and
that's
quoting.
behind me.
And
That's why I hesitate to move forward with
this
the
too
PhD.
shall pass,
Yeah.
or I will. So that's
One of them.
One of them will definitely happen. Yep.
Well, for me, I'm making a new effort. It's a new mat in 2018. In the past, I would try to get out of my kind of theological bubble.
Okay.
Anything that I was reading, of course, I was in seminary for a lot of
Right.
that, would be seminary, Old Testament, New Testament, systematic, whatever. But anything that I would read for quote unquote pleasure was going to be a theology
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
And which is great. I mean, you learn more, you dive deeper, and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But I've attempted to add, I think 2 years ago it was history, and I realized how quickly I love to maybe watch history or hear somebody tell me history, but I don't like to read
Yeah.
it. They're so
It's
long.
hit or miss.
It's
hit or miss.
and
man.
I had one that I liked. It's called We Die Alone. It was fantastic. The other one I made it like 2 chapters in. Like, nope, back to theology. We're going back to the institutes, baby. And then the last year I tried biographies. It was kind of the same thing. And I messed up and started with Just As I Am.
Okay.
And it wasn't that it was bad. It was just I kept looking at it as I still have like 10,000
Yes,
more pages
it's
to go. Like I've thought, I've made a good chunk
Right.
of this, but I've still got to. So I got kind of discouraged by it. And so I would quit after maybe 1.5 books,
Yeah.
and the same with those biographies. But it just didn't work. But so far at least, we're 2 or 3 weeks in.
Yeah.
I'm digging what I'm doing. I've added fiction this
Okay.
time, and specifically Star Wars. And it actually comes highly
all right.
recommended by Van Hooser, another book that I finished a few weeks ago, called The Pastor as Theologian, which was one of the books I read. And he said that you need to get out of just theology books,
Yeah.
and you also need to read some poetry,
Right.
some history, some biography. Of course, I was like, I'm good. Like, no thanks. Let's just skip to the one I like,
Yeah.
fiction. And so I've read at this point the 5 Solas of the Reformation, Pastor as Theologian, the 9 Marks book on evangelism, a couple of Star Wars books, The Dark Disciple, Catalyst come offhand, finished Judges in my Bible reading. So I'm way ahead of you on that.
So do you read, because I'll have like 5 books going at
Yeah.
once. And so sometimes I'll go, even a month without finishing a book. And then within a week, I've finished 4 or 5.
Yeah.
What do you do?
I do usually 2 at a time.
Okay.
There's been times where it's been more like if I was doing school.
Yeah.
Now I try to have one theology book. Like, when I
Yeah.
started the year, it was the 5 Solas of the Reformation, and then one fiction book, and that was Dark Disciple. It was a book by Star Wars, or from Star Wars. And so it's a good kind of balance. And each of them that I'm kind of peppering through goes from maybe theology, just straight theology, to something practical and ministry, like the Pastor as Theologian, a biography, history, all of that, just kind of rotate through to really try and well-round while I'm not in seminary, and into one, stay used to reading hundreds of pages, a day or a week, because that day is probably coming again when I jump back into it. And we'll talk about that on another episode. But enough of all of our reading stuff. Y'all don't care what we're reading anyway. Let's talk winter. First things first, Kyle, have you ever had to call off a worship service in Alamogordo?
No, not in Alamogordo.
Okay, but you have, we talked about this before, but you
Right.
had elsewhere. Tell us about that.
Right. Yeah. So when I was in a little town called Clayton up in the northeast corner of New Mexico, we'd have times we just got hammered with snow. 7-8 inches at a time, and with an inch of ice underneath it all.
Yeah.
And I really, I didn't ever really hesitate in those times to call it off. And in fact, in Clayton, we were a town of about 2,000 people, 90 miles from the closest Walmart. So we were in the middle of nowhere. There were a few hotels, a couple of chain hotels, and then a couple of mom and pops. And when those happen, particularly this time of year, Clayton's right, catches a lot of the ski traffic coming up from Texas. And so the hotels fill up quickly. And so we would oftentimes get a call from the sheriff's department asking if we could open up our building. And I think there were 4 times in my 3.5 years there that we had 100 to 150 people sleeping in the church.
Did you pass the plate?
No, but believe it or not, I mean, no, but we collect. I remember there was one, we got like $900 in donations. Oh, wow. I mean, folks were on their way to ski, and they'd already made hotel reservations or planned on paying for a hotel, and they were very generous with that. And so those nights, I mean, I would just set up a blanket in my office and sleep in the floor of my office.
Still there? Awesome.
And do as much as we could to serve folks. Yeah. How about you? Have you ever had to cancel?
Well, up in Mayhill, I doubt it's ever going to happen. We'll talk about that in a minute. But back in Grand Prairie, mentioning Dallas, Texas, or whatever earlier, you're in an area not ready for snow, let alone ice. Ice is really more problematic than anything else. And we had a major ice storm that hit DFW, and they couldn't really handle it on the roads. And then there was another time in Bandera, it wasn't snow, but we had some flooding. And all of our people, just about our entire church, would be on the other side of creeks, and they would have to pass them. And there was no, literally no way to pass it, no way to even get to church. But I haven't had to do this yet in Mayhill. But the question then becomes, what do you do when that happens, when getting to the church is treacherous? It's one thing to just cancel it. Are there some things that we can do? What are some of the options that we have?
Yeah. So one that I've not yet used, because I've been here almost 2 years. We haven't had to use this. We haven't had to cancel here. But one that I've seen a lot of guys on social media do is they'll do like a Facebook Live thing from their church or from their living room. And I wasn't familiar with Facebook Live last time we had to do it. That would be probably my first go-to, is I would say, hey, we're going to cancel, because particularly when you lead an elderly congregation, I mean, there will be folks that if the church is open, they feel like they've got to try to get there. And that was what always was the call for me, is I don't want folks getting out in this. I don't want to risk anybody falling. Meeting together is important, but
killing yourself
is not right. And getting somebody hurt is not. I mean, so I think we have freedom in that to be smart and make those decisions. But yeah, so social media would be certainly one way that we could utilize that. It's a really cool tool. I don't know. What would you do in that event? Have you thought through that?
Well, I think the first question we have to ask you touched on is, can they get to church?
Right.
Or should they get to church? In the Bandera situation, they couldn't. And then at times there may be a point where they shouldn't.
Right.
And like you said, some just feel that they have to. And we love those folks, and we need those folks. And so really the question that I ask first is, can I get there? And now I live, 10 feet from the church. So that answer is usually pretty well obvious. I'll always be able to get to the church. And so then the question for us in Mayhill really has nothing to do with the roads, because Highway 82 is going to be cleared immediately. And so almost anybody can get to the road. So there's no issue there. The only thing we run into at Mayhill is ice, maybe getting on some of the power lines and so forth, and losing power. If we lose power, and not, in it being 15 degrees outside and everything, we wouldn't have it. But yeah, like you said, that's where you look at things like either recording something and sending it out, or doing a live stream or Facebook Live. In Bandera, when that flooding occurred, we had a deacon that was able to make it. So he led a devotion and a prayer time. I was going to be out of town that Sunday anyway. I was in town for our anniversary or something. And then when the ice hit Dallas, Aaron and I, we didn't have a pastor at the time. He recorded some music, and then I recorded a sermon. We put it together and we threw it on the website. And if y'all want to watch it, you do. And if you do, you get a golden crown in heaven.
There was one Sunday in Clayton. we were on our way back after Thanksgiving, and we got stuck in Amarillo, which is about 2 hours south of Clayton. And I mean, everything was a sheet of ice. We were going to spend the night and plan to get in the next morning. And I got a call from one of my deacons who had planned to go elk hunting, and they got about a mile out of town and turned back and came home and called me and said, "Don't try it." And I knew, man, if these guys are serious hunters. I said, if they're not going out, I'm not making it back. And so I called the deacon and did the same thing. Said, I'm not going to make it in. You guys cover it. And that's a blessing. And to have folks who can fill in on the spot like that. I know one of the big questions is always, well, what do we do with the offering? Because even if we're not able to meet, there's still bills to be paid, right? Obviously, online giving is going to go a long way to ease some of that, because it's with a click. I give online every week anyway. But my response to that was always, look, we just trust God, right? So we're going to make the wisest decision we can, and then we're going to trust that God will cover it through the rest of the month's offerings to still be able to pay all the bills on time. And there were a couple of times where it got a little tight, but never to the point where we were like, man, we blew it. So
And I think that's really the point of this episode, because depending upon where you live, winter weather is either expected or unexpected. And you have to use wisdom, and God says he's going to give you wisdom. But we live in a day and age where technology makes it possible for you to do something. So if you do have to cancel, then there's something that you can do, whether it's recording, doing the live stream, whatever. If at all possible, you can't beat gathering as a local church together in the building for worship. I mean, you can't beat that. But if that can't be done, and it's not wise to do, have a plan in place for something for your folks, whether it's a recorded sermon, Facebook Live, devotional, whatever, but do something to give your folks a chance to worship on the Lord's Day. I don't suspect that's ever going to happen in Alamo. Y'all are just grateful to be under 100 degrees right now.
Maybe if it, we would cancel because it's too hot. No, it's too hot to stay in. Stay in. Happy Christmas. Stay inside. It's too hot outside.
But Kyle, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Send us out and don't mess up. There's no pressure. You got this.
All right. So we would invite you to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. Follow us on Facebook at Not Another Baptist Podcast, on Twitter at NAB_podcast. And as always, or NotAnotherBaptistPodcast.com.
Nice.
Almost left that out.
Yeah.
And as always, may your coffee be as black as night and as bold as the gospel you proclaim. God bless you guys.
Have a good one. Stay warm.